right, it is 8:34. We're back from executive session.
Mayor, if you could announce the date
The date, January 14th, 2020.
and that no action was taken in the executive session.
No action was taken in executive session. We'll proceed to item number 2, discussion and possible action concerning Wayside Chapel Evangelical Free Church versus City of Castle Hills et al. Mr. Schnall?
Mayor, if any member of the council wants to take any action, this is the time to do it. If there's no motion for consideration, then this item can be closed and move on to the next item. I guess we're on item number 3 after this.
Perfect.
I guess I can move to close or to, I guess whatever the appropriate term is, I move to go ahead and close this item then.
No motion is necessary to take no action. If there's no one making any motion, then the mayor can simply close the item and move on. If you'd like to make a motion that you take no action, you can do that and see if it gets approved. But
Okay,
it's
well,
superfluous.
I'm going to assume there's no action, and we'll proceed to item number 3, discussion and possible action on an award for a construction contract for the Watershed 3 Drainage Improvements Phase 1, Banyan Drive and Glen Tower Drive Drainage Project. Mr. Rapley. We do have somebody sign up to speak who's been waiting very patiently. Mr. Elzinga, would you like to come up first? Thank you.
Thank you, Doug Elzinga, 103 Tamworth Drive, and I just want to thank the council for working on this issue. I know I've met individually with each one of you, and you've expressed that your willingness to try and get this issue solved. I want to remind you this is not a street paving issue. This is really a public safety issue. As we know, every time we have a rain, Banyan becomes a raging river. 2014, a nurse driving on her way to work early in the morning, no barriers out, drove down Tamworth, took a right onto Banyan, couldn't see the high water, drove in, was lucky to escape with her life. Every time it rains, I see cars going around the barriers, going up and down. I'm seeing cars thinking that it's fun to just go up and down there and see if they can make it through the water. I've seen children riding their bikes back and forth across the water. At some point, somebody's going to seriously injure themselves or lose their life. So I'm just asking that you keep that in mind as you consider these proposals, that we need to get this fixed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elzinga. Mr. Rapley?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Within the packets, we have, of course, the breakouts of the bids that came in for this project as compared to the 3 bids we received, including the line item which has engineering estimates. Right now, I'd like to have Jason Granado, who was our engineer from RBS, come up and give a presentation and then talk about the project itself. He wants to give you a layout and scope of the base and the add alternate pieces of this construction project.
Hello, how are you doing? My name is Jason Granado. I'm the engineer of record for this project, and I'd like to go forth and just explain a little bit about how this project was broken up in terms of the base add alternate 1 and add alternate 2 bids. So this is what we're talking about is Banyan and Glen Tower Drive. Looking at the handouts that I have given you, the base bid consists of primarily roadway and street drainage, but I want to emphasize that this is a drainage project. So keep that in mind as going forward when we break out these bids. So the base bid includes, as you can see right there by Northwest Military Drive, a reconstructed concrete line channel. And there's also an outfall for 2 7x4 box culverts. Those box culverts are currently going to be picking up flow along Banyan and outfalling it at that proposed drainage culvert outfall. And then it goes and bypasses the existing outfall between Glen Tower and Tamworth. So that's the main meat and potatoes of this design. It's meant to It's meant to divert flow around from that drainage channel, and it's going to take it all the way down to the existing drainage outfall channel by the TxDOT frontage road. So this also includes the storm sewer, 4 inlets, and concrete roadway reconstruction from just past Garden View to Glen Tower, and then from Glen Tower to Northwest Military Frontage Road, that's going to be an asphalt pavement, so there's 2 different pavement items there. That also includes, driveway reconstruction, curbs, sidewalks, and other pertinent information such as sodding and grading and all of that good stuff. So that's primarily the base bid. At alternate 1 is an extension of the current storm sewer that's in the current base bid. So if you see in green, we would extend the storm sewer all the way up to just past Garden View, and that includes a junction box and 6 additional inlets to pick up the flow that's coming from Carrollwood onto Banyan, and then eventually, the flow splits and then eventually makes its way down towards the TxDOT outfall. So at alternate 1, just to recap, is primarily a drainage component. So it's going to pick up more flow than the current 4 proposed inlets that are in the base bid. At alternate 3 is in orange, and that's pretty much roadway construction. That's taking the concrete pavement and extending it to Tamworth from the limits of the base bid, and then on the other side, taking it all the way to Carrollwood. Again, that also includes curb reconstruction, driveways, and other pertinent items. Another thing to note, it's going to include the reconstruction of Carrollwood intersection versus Tamworth on the other side. It just abuts up to the existing concrete infrastructure that you have in place. So that's pretty much how we split everything up. Again, the base bid, just a little bit more detail, has 671 linear feet of box culvert, 2 7x4 box culverts. The concrete channel is going to be around 776 cubic yards, so it's a pretty big item. So these are the biggest items within the base bid, including the curb inlets, junction boxes, and the roadway aspect of that. The base bid also includes the utility adjustments. There's a Saws water line that has to be adjusted, and there are multiple sanitary sewer manholes that need to be adjusted to grade because we're slightly changing the roadway profile just a bit. And there's also a CPS gas line that is having to be adjusted. Looking at the slide up there, I think the third slide up there, the third slide will give you a better overview of where the utility adjustments are located. If you go down one more slide, Ryan. Next slide. Oh, it's only the PDF. Okay, so
I'll go back here.
Yeah, the PowerPoint. I apologize. Again, just to expand on alternative 1 base bid or alternative 1 bid, there's 846 linear feet of 7x4 box culvert. So that gives you a good idea of the difference between base bid and at alternate 1. And again, it's 6 inlets with 1 junction box.
You want the base or back on?
Let's go to the one prior to that. So right there, you'll see where our utility adjustments are needed. It's the main utility adjustments that are needed are going to be between Glen Tower and Garden View, where the box culvert is in conflict with existing utilities. So we're going to have to provide adjustments for that. So that's water and sewer in that area. Looking at the Glen Tower and Northwest Military Frontage Road intersection area, there's going to be, again, water line adjustments and a gas line adjustment as well, including sanitary sewer manhole adjustments as well. So that is primarily those are primarily the biggest bid items within these three alternates. So I'm here to answer any questions that you have regarding cost, design, the history of the project, and how we got here. So I can open it up to questions to you so I can answer the best I can to my abilities.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morganos. Council, Mr. Gregory, I imagine you have a couple questions?
I'm going to pass until the rest of the council asks questions.
Ms. Winger, Mr. May.
I just have a question on the add-on on Alt 3.
Yes, sir.
How do you explain the great variance on tree mitigation between the three bids?
So the tree mitigation plan, currently, the city of Castle Hills does not have a mitigation plan itself. It has a tree removal plan, and it tells you what you can and cannot remove and things of that nature. But what we decided to follow was the city of San Antonio, which has a mitigation factor, which is you remove certain species of trees at a certain diameter. Some of them are protected, some aren't, some are native, some aren't. And given that list, there is a 3-to-1 ratio. If you're removing a tree that's heritage or significant, you have to replace the heritage trees at a 3-to-1 ratio. For instance, if you're taking away a 10-inch heritage tree, you got to replace it with 30 inches of trees. But the significant are 1-to-1. So if you take away a 10-inch, you got to replace it with a 10-inch. So there really was no mitigation outlined from the city of Castle Hills. So it was more of an open-ended question to the contractor and something that we would have to coordinate with city of Castle Hills in terms of what type of tree do you want to put back, what size of the tree, and it was just an unknown at that point. So right now, the contractor doesn't know what he's replacing it with. So that's where the difference comes into play.
So if I can interpret this, each of the three bids are just guessing as to what quality of replacement the city wants or what they deem appropriate? Is that
Correct, and we don't recommend going with add alternate 3. We recommend going with just a 1-to-1 ratio and replacing with native trees, which are fairly inexpensive. And if you look at the base bid for the tree mitigation at a 1-to-1, you'll see that the prices are fairly reasonable.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Sanderson.
I'm not sure if you can answer this question right here, but I noticed that one of the contractors here, the price is substantially higher than the other two, at least for just the base bid. Do you have any idea why that might be, or explain to us how we'd have what appears to be a $1.4 million difference between those two? The first two seem to be, Easybell and Pronto, seem to be pretty similar in their
And you're referring
their
to
estimate.
to the Alamo contractors, correct? Yeah. I can't specifically say why they came in so high, but I can tell you that certain contractors within the city have certain fortes on what they can and cannot do. Their production rates are a lot faster in certain aspects of construction. For instance, one may be faster at doing utility reconstruction. One may have a forte in doing roadway reconstruction or rehab, whatever it may be. There's a lot of mitigating factors for why that's so high, and I can't tell you why Alamo was so high. But we do have history with Pronto and Easybell, and we have worked with them before, and we kind of know what their forte is. So you can kind of see, for instance, the saws, water and sewer. I think Pronto was pretty close to what we had bid because that's what they do. That is their forte. So just given that type of relationship, I think I really can't say why that was so high, but that is something that we
In my packet, it's
acknowledge.
marked denotes mathematical error, and I'm kind of puzzled over this denotation here, and what exactly does that mean?
So for instance, we have to go and back check all of their calculations, and they'll assign a unit bid price, and then we'll multiply it by the quantity. So that quantity times the unit bid price did not equal what total they had, so it affects their total cost all the way down. So that one unit bid price, it was very minor. I think it was in the realm of $100 off. So that's just something that we have to disclose and show that was a mathematical error, because when something like that does happen, we are obligated to go with the unit price that governs. The total price does not govern, it is a unit bid price.
So are all of these prices for all these phases, are they with the assumption that they are going to be done, I guess, in an expeditious manner, one right after another, or done simultaneously, or is there any kind of time-based assumption about the pricing and how that's built in?
That is up to the contractor as well. What we do as an engineer, we try to phase the project to give the contractor more. In this case, what was our constraint was right-of-way and the residents. So what we had done was phase the construction to where they can close off a big segment of the roadway and allow them to go through and not allow two-way traffic. So the more room they have to operate, the faster the production can be, which means I think the less amount of time they can spend, it equals less amount of time for construction, so it saves money.
So would there be any logic or sense in doing all of these simultaneously at one time, or can
for
they
the
be done in
construction?
parallel, or what kind of parallelism can be built into this, or is there any?
For this one, since it's primarily a drainage project that you have to construct from the downstream and work your way up, so that's pretty much the only constraint on what they can do. They can start the utility construction first, but there's some things that they can do simultaneously, some they can't. That's more of a phasing.
Was that built into this, or was this assumed that these were going to be independent operations and they would not?
I think it's fair to assume that it is built in, because the contractor knows what needs to happen first. The underground's going to happen. Underground construction is going to happen before the street is being constructed. So there's a certain sequencing of what you can and cannot do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Israel?
Nothing at this time, Mayor.
Ms. Winger?
So, let me just see that I'm clear on this. What we have here is, on these costs, basically what we're looking at is the drainage and roadway, correct?
Correct.
Because the rest of it, the utilities have to take care of.
Correct.
Okay, so I think Mr. Sanderson already asked you the question about the discrepancy, and your estimate is substantially lower.
Correct. We acknowledge that.
Is it your opinion that we can get a better bid?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Is it your opinion that we can get a better bid? Because it's really substantially lower.
Our engineering estimate for the box culvert.
I'm sorry?
The engineering estimate for the box culvert was low, and you are correct on that. But to answer your question regarding, do you think we can get a better bid later on? My answer is no. After this, it becomes public knowledge. Other contractors see what other contractors have bid, and the result may be less bids, and you may not get the prices you want, given the fact that material cost is only going to be increasing from now.
Well,
and I can elaborate.
But we can. I mean, there's nothing that precludes us from going to get another bid.
Correct. You asked me if I would recommend that, or if,
Yeah.
and I would say no.
Well, why? I mean, if your estimate is so much lower, I mean, it's substantially different.
If you look at the bid analysis, you'll see the difference in cost is primarily through one bid item, which is the box
It's primarily
culverts.
what?
It's primarily through one bid item, and it is the box culvert. So we had bid it at 550.
Oh, so you didn't consider the culverts?
I'm sorry, what?
You didn't consider the culverts? We talked about
No, we
this
did.
before.
We did.
Oh.
I'm talking about the unit price, and I'm going to give you an explanation as to why we are off a little bit, or significantly.
So they want, in other words, based on your estimate, which of course is what we voted for, you think that they're charging more for the culverts than they should?
Based off of our conversations with material manufacturers such as Oldcastle, Hanson, manufacturers that produce concrete structures just like this, after the bids came in, we were alarmed that we were so off on that unit price.
And that's not the first time that's happened. I've raised this before. You've been off before, not you personally, but your firm.
Correct, and let me explain. When we asked for an explanation as to why we are off, we asked the contractor and the materials manufacturer. Materials manufacturers came back and told us that steel has risen significantly in price, and that has been driving up the cost of the box culverts. These box culverts are 7x4 precast concrete structures, which require a lot of rebar and reinforcement. These are not small 24-inch small diameter pipes. These are fairly significant structures. So material cost and productions from the manufacturers have cost an increase. I think the specifics from this project itself and the right-of-way constraints, the contractor did tell us that it would be labor-intensive given our right-of-way constraints and the proximity with old infrastructure. So they had to increase the
But isn't that something
labor.
you're supposed to know? I mean, that's why we hire professionals, and that's
Correct.
why I raised it, because it was an issue previously.
Correct.
So we make decisions to how to spend the people's money based on your professional advice, and then it turns out you're wrong repeatedly. I mean, this isn't the first time. That's my concern.
I understand your concerns, and just to clarify a little bit further, we did do our due diligence. We researched these prices extensively, and we use TxDOT as a significant resource for researching these bid items. When they did come in at the time of our estimate, I believe it was back in October, we used October moving averages for bids, meaning that TxDOT has all these contractors and projects that come through them, and they release these average unit bid prices. And we research those through the TxDOT website and look at and see what on average these box culverts are coming in at with all these different contractors. So at the time of our estimate, they were coming in between $455 a linear foot and $500 a linear foot. We as a engineer, we bumped up that estimate to 550, and we have documentation of that and justification and doing our due diligence to come up with that estimate. However, there's some unforeseen circumstances that we cannot account for. One being material cost, inflation, demand. There's a lot of projects going on at this time. One of our contractors asked us to delay this project because there's TxDOT projects that are coming out in mass this same month. So with a limited amount of contractors and resources, you know, they have to increase their labor rates. And unfortunately, that's a byproduct of the timing and circumstances of this project coming out at this time.
Well, the other concern that I have is obviously, you know, we can see who the lowest price is here. I don't suppose I should say anything about that, but this particular company that came in with the lowest price, which is still, you know, like $350,000 over your estimate, we've had a lot of trouble with them. We had another project they did on Danube, and it was just an absolute nightmare for our residents. I'd be really resistant to using them again for that reason, because I know
Correct.
what they'll put people through.
And a little bit of background on that, like I had mentioned before, that contractor that you had mentioned, that wasn't their forte. That's not what they specialized in.
I'm sorry?
That wasn't what they specialize in. That's not what they're known for. They actually subbed out that work to a subcontractor to do that work. So it was another subcontractor that did it,
So it wasn't them,
not directly, no.
but yet that's who we ended up negotiating with, and they charged us for doing stuff that they had committed to do in the first place, and we had to pay quite a bit of extra money. I mean, I wasn't on council, but, you know, it's all our money, we know
And-
about it.
Based off of the best of my knowledge, that's my extent of what I know. I
So
wasn't
you're
here for
saying
that
they
project.
subcontracted?
They
I saw
subcon-
them
they
there.
su- they
I saw
subcontracted it
Easy
out.
Bell there for the whole time. It was their trucks, their people. So who, I don't know who they subcontracted to.
And I don't have, I can gladly get you that information at a later time, but I don't have that on.
Yeah,
hand.
well, anyway, it's just a concern because obviously, again, there's a substantial difference, not so much with them in the next one, but the third one, which is really higher.
Correct.
Maybe they're a lot better, but the thing is, we have limited resources.
I understand.
So, okay,
Mr.
that's all I have.
Mr. Sanderson, yes, sir.
So how much of this deviation do you believe between these various bids are due to commodity price fluctuations? Steel, cement, whatever.
Primarily, the culverts are going to be your biggest cost differential. That's going to constitute the majority of both the base bid and the ad alternative. So if you add up all the roadway components versus the drainage components are far more expensive. But I can't give you.
So if any variations would affect them disproportionately, I guess, in the bid. And another quick question for you is, when did your bid, excuse me if I didn't keep up with the timeline, so you submitted a bid, or you committed these to numbers at a particular date, and when were the numbers committed by the various subcontractors? Do we have that information? I mean, is there a considerable difference? We're talking, 5 or 6 months in difference, or a month or two, or what's because that might account for any kind of difference in commodity prices. That's why I'm trying to kind of explore why
Are you
the
talking
big
about
difference there.
the current bid tabulations? Is that what we're talking about?
That's correct, both the current bids and your estimate. What is the time?
Oh, the time difference.
Between those. So, did you do your estimate like in February of this year, and then these guys came out with their estimate in July? I mean, I don't know.
I would say around 3 to 4 months difference, because I
So
think.
there's about a 4-month differential there between them, okay.
Correct.
So do you keep track of commodity prices or the price differentials that we would expect to see as far as changes during that time? And could that 3 or 4 months account for these differentials?
We don't necessarily keep track of it on a monthly basis, but given the fact that when we progress through the 30, 60, 90 process, we update the bids at those unique milestones. So unfortunately, sometimes you go a certain amount of time before you go into the next submittal. So that's when we typically update our bid, or basically our estimate.
So I'm assuming that these contract companies here, they would do pretty much the same thing as well too. Then they would update their assumptions or during the process. Then is that correct?
The contractor's unit bid prices are solely come from the contractor. There's no bearing on any other average unit bid prices. They bid appropriately what they think they can make money off of. And unfortunately, we don't have any control over their bid prices, only what's been submitted. And we
Okay,
take
that makes
average.
sense. Okay.
Mr. May.
Just a quick follow-up. I'm not asking you to name which of the 3 bids you would take if it was your decision. I'm just asking, have you, based on knowing the industry, knowing the actors and other projects, in your mind, do you have a selection which would be the best of the 3 bids?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Do you want me to specifically say which one, or?
Well, the reason I'm asking that question is before we came tonight, I reached out. This is not an area of my expertise, but I reached out to a prominent construction firm here in San Antonio and an equally prominent civil engineering firm. And just given the names and the reputation, curiously, both independently came up with the same name. So I just wanted to have it out there. So, you know, that says a lot to me. So I'm very interested in what you have to say about that, the reputation of prior work projects.
Sounds like a great idea. Feel free to share that if you can.
I'm not too sure if am I going to be in any legal trouble if I make a recommendation here without consulting the city manager or anybody else?
Well, we might need to go into executive session on it because it's a contract issue. You know, we can't do it in the open.
Because we haven't awarded anything yet.
Mr. Schnall, would you care to weigh in, please?
I don't think that it's appropriate or possible under the Open Meetings Act to go into an executive session to discuss business terms of a contract.
Why
Thank you so
not?
much. Because he said so, I would assume?
Because I
That's
can't
not
think
enough.
I cannot think of a provision.
He said so is not an answer, I'm sorry.
Because I cannot identify a subsection of Chapter 551, the Open Meetings Act, that would allow a governing body to go into an executive session to discuss business terms.
It is indeed in the act, I'm sorry, Mark, but it is under contracts because it involves the spending of people's money, so I have to tell you you're wrong.
In the interim, Mr. Gregory, in the interest of time, do you have any questions?
I want to know the answers, I want to know what
I
you
wanted council to have all the time they wanted.
probably good.
I've been pushing this thing for some time, several years. I brought this to council in 2005 to get it fixed. We had a bid of $300,000. Oh, that's way too much. Way
But
too
it
much.
didn't involve a lot of stuff.
It involved a lot of stuff. We're faced with a situation of a street that's basically not a street anymore. This affects 5 streets significantly. It's a significant drainage problem, and our drainage problems are not getting any better. And the increased risk to the various streets in the neighborhood continue to rise. I've seen councils go out to bid on quite a few many things, from the drainage thing in back of the Wedgewood, various streets around here. And all I know is these contractors have cities by the throat, and they can do just about anything they want to, and generally they get away with it. What you're looking for is a project that needs to be done now. There is no guarantee if we delay for new bids that we'll even get any new bids. There's no guarantee if we go out for new bids, they will be lower. They may be actually higher. I have a list of all the percentage differences of all the various things here, and they're up and down all over the place. Up, down, up 91%, down, up 700%, down 747%. And apparently that is due to, as we have been informed, the expertise of each particular firm has their own little expertise. One interesting little thing on this page was some little widget cost $425. One firm bid $4,250. The other firm bid $425. The other one bid, I think, $17,000. Well, you know, somewhere in between there, reality sort of goes to another planet. You were very accurate on Antler. I would have liked this to have been substantially closer to your target. I'm not dismayed, as I said, I am ticked off. But I think the council has to, for the city's sake, we've got to move forward now. We've delayed this for 17 years. We've actually had suggestions that would just raise all the houses along Banyan, because they're all subject to flooding. But that suggestion was made because the street got worse and nothing was done. I've been pushing this project, I've continued to push it. I would like Mr. May to tell us who he thinks is the better firm. I am more than open to hear what he has to say. I appreciate Mr. Granado's candidness as to what goes on. I deliberately put him in the hot seat. He did, in my opinion, very well. I think, Mr. May, can you illuminate us which firm that you found would be the one that you thought had a better reputation?
Well, the one that both of these two independent sources agreed on was Easy Bell, and that was based on prior work. And that's interesting to me because they are very close to being the lowest bid, and yet, based on each one, the construction firm and the civil engineers, they had an easy working relationship. They delivered the product that was promised, and they did it in a relatively good timeline for what they wanted to do. So if there's no objection, I'd like to hear what your recommendation would be.
Well, before we get there, I think Mr. Schnall had something to add to that.
Well, I have looked now, Ms. Wenger, through Chapter 551, beginning with 551.071, all the way through the end of the subsection on exceptions to the requirement that meetings be open. There is no exception for a discussion of a contract. I don't know what your thinking was, but there is no basis to go into an executive session to discuss the contract. If you can identify the exact section you were thinking of, I'll be glad to look at it and read it, but I have looked through this twice now, and there is not a provision in the Open Meetings Act that allows this governing body to go into an executive session to discuss the financial terms or other matters concerning this contract unless it's a consultation with the attorney involving a legal matter, not a business term matter, under the contract. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir, Mr. Schnall. Mr. Granados, if you'd like to answer now.
Correct, it would be Easy Bell. We've done, in our experience, we have done work with Easy Bell before. In terms of a recommendation, it depends on which ad alternate you go with, which determines the low bid. If you do, I think there is a 1,000, I think it's between 2.8 and 2.9 million, which are the costs for Pronto and Easy Bell. They're very, very close if we were to just go with Adult 1 and the base bid.
And I think it's reasonable to expect that Easy Bell's projection of the cost of replacing trees is going to end up, in the long run, substantially closer to what you had and the competitors had, which would be approximately a savings of $100,000. But that's just a possibility. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move a motion we accept Easy Bell as the firm to do the Watershed 3 Drainage Improvement Phase 1 Banyan and Glen Tower, along with Alt 1, 2, and 3.
Mr. Gregory, before you get a second on that, would it be okay for me to ask a couple questions?
Sure.
Mayor, really, once the motion is
I'm
made, there
sorry.
really needs to be a second, and then there can be discussion and more questions.
Perfect. Second by
Second.
Mr. Sanderson. Discussion? Anybody else before I go? Mr. Isbrand?
I'll defer to you, but I'd like to have the opportunity to ask a question.
Yes, sir. Mr. Granados, one of the things that I was told by San Antonio, was that the critical point was the area underneath 410, that could not take any more water flow than it was currently taking. And while I would like to support this project, I have a little bit of concern that we're shifting the issue from where it currently is at Banyan to potentially somewhere else along the 410, Northwest Military area.
You talking about the existing outfall that goes underneath 410 Frontage Road?
Yes, sir.
We have done coordination with TxDOT. They have approved our drainage analysis, and currently we're not adding any additional flow. We've done a split flow analysis using 2D modeling, And I know that's a lot of words, but what it came down to is there is no significant increase in flow because we're just splitting the flow and diverting it away from the problem area where you currently have it, which is that outfall area between Tamworth and Glen Tower.
Does it still address the 10-year? Is that,
Yes, it addresses the 10-year, and we also had to analyze for the 25-year as well.
Okay, so you're confident it won't create an issue where we're spilling water onto Northwest Military?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Isbrand?
Thank you. Mr. Rapley, I just have a question. So we, I guess, knew what we expected generally the cost to be. This is higher than anticipated. If we were to accept this bid, does this impact any other projects or the process that we're going through to address other upcoming initiatives?
yes, Councilman, I'll go ahead and answer that and let you know. Last year, and I had mentioned to council in our funds, in moving forward with Antler, we had about $4 million in streets and drainage, streets and drainage funds. And as Mr. Gregory alluded to, Antler, the bids came in great, and you always want to be close to 10% or below. This particularly is, you know, as Mr. Granado said, right over 20%. We budgeted this year in the budget closer or above the estimate of what the probable cost by the engineers. We are also looking at Mimosa Cremeria to West Avenue project. The probable cost on that right now is about 1.1. It's being designed. We're working through some issues with saws on sewer relocation areas, so that might prolong that project. To answer your question, we could do the base and the Alt 1, but essentially we would be clearing out these funds, essentially. So we'd have to find the construction dollars from Mimosa Cremeria at some point. We've done, obviously, reconciliation with engineering funds engineering expenses for not only this project, but Mimosa, and closing up Antler. So we've accounted for those things, and giving us a total would allow, to a certain extent, to do the base. Again, we weren't expecting the Adult 1 to be this high, because clearly, you look at it, Pronto is about 8%, and 14-15% on Easy Bell. But you look at the totals for Easy Bell, 2.8, and then you look at Pronto, 3.2. So obviously, that's a pretty significant difference. But generally, you're looking at base alt of 2.8 and the base probable cost plus alt 1, we're roughly $500K off overall by going through and doing the base and add 1. Obviously, as I mentioned, $500K considerably almost eliminates most of the construction dollars for the Mimosa Cremeria project down the road, which means council at some point is going to have to find alternate funding. Now, we continue to get money. We get street maintenance money. We get our digital billboard money that will eventually, over time, recoup those funds. But the bigger picture will be council trying to find alternate funding to do the bigger projects down the road. Hope that clears it up, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I don't think anyone disputes that this needs to be done. This is needed to be done for a very long time. But what we will ultimately need to address down the road then going forward based on this type of cost.
Well, the recoup time roughly looks like it could be approximately a little over a year. Because Mr. Rapley informed me the digital sign committee may have to constitute again because somebody else is looking for another digital sign. And that might be an additional $100,000 to $200,000. And the Cremeria project, if we delay it a minor period of time, it could be fully funded, I would think. And our financial advisors, whenever we choose financial advisors, would probably tell you within a year or maybe 18 months max. But it can be done in a relatively brief period of time and have it fully funded. So it doesn't impact raising taxes.
Ms. Winger?
Didn't we just repave Cremeria?
No, you're talking about the dip.
I'm talking about the street.
The street has no effect to what's being done right now. Mimosa Cremeria down to West Avenue is actually concreting the channels to improve the drainage. It has nothing to do with the street.
Okay, thank you.
Can I mention something, Mayor, real
Yes,
quick? Going with the, and I don't recall Mr. Gregory's motion, did you account for base, add 1 and add 2? And 3? Okay, again, just to be.
eliminate 3 and fund it ourselves.
Well, again, I'm gonna paint the picture that we would be eventually on the negative side of our funds at that point.
We do not have, you're telling me, we do not have the full of funds for doing the project and doing alt 1, 2, and 3.
Not for all 3, add alt 1 and 2 and 3, but the base and add 1.
Wait a
How
minute, wait a
short
minute.
are we?
What's all two? Drainage and roadway, doesn't that cover that? What, I don't understand. I specifically asked that question. Drainage and roadway.
Yeah, on the map up there, the orange is all 3, Jason?
Correct. If you allow me to further explain, drainage and roadway is considered part of the
Right,
base
so
bid.
so that's the figure we're looking at. What
But-
we're not looking at is tree mitigation. That's the only thing that's not in there, correct? Because you
correct.
have drainage and roadway, and then you have roadway. So obviously, we're not just gonna do roadway because we have a drainage problem.
So your drainage only goes up to the limits of where you see in green, where I think you have that printout as well. So it doesn't go beyond past what the green limits have. It doesn't go all the way to Carrollwood. It stops short of that. So adult 3 is basically
So we're not dealing with Carrollwood?
for the drainage.
But
So-
that's
so-
our problem.
It's right here on the picture. Do you have this picture in front of you, Ms. Winger?
Yeah, I thought so.
No, it's the big color one. It's not in your binder.
Here,
So adult 3 is in orange, and that's primarily roadway component.
Mr. Granados, if we were to do add all 2, and somewhere down the line we wanted to add additional drainage on Carrollwood, wouldn't we have to tear up add all 2?
You're correct. I'm sorry, I'm confused with another exhibit that I created. But yes, adult 2 is the roadway component on the ends. Adult 3 is the tree mitigation.
So my question was, if we do add all 2, and somewhere down the line we decide that we want to take care of, we can afford to take care of the issues on Carrollwood, we would have to tear up the concrete, which is
Correct.
add all 2. So it's kind of wasting money right now?
Correct. There's some other factors you might want to consider. I know a lot of your off-site drainage is coming from the city of San Antonio. I know that's a completely separate
Sure.
issue, but given that the next bond for the city is starting to gear up and the city's starting to plan for future improvements, that's something that the city can work with the city of San Antonio to maybe improve the off-site drainage coming into your city. Because right now, we developed these limits of, for our drainage to make a significant impact downstream. So what we have in adult 1 will have a very significant impact to your drainage concerns. And I think it would be long-lasting.
So in my opinion, it just seems very short-sighted for us to go spend almost $500,000 and potentially have to either core through that or tear it out so that
Correct.
we can provide additional drainage from one of the biggest issues, which is at Banyan and Carrollwood.
Can I amend the motion, of his original motion right here to go
Can I
ahead?
get an answer from him real quick so
Oh.
we can decide which way to go?
Yeah, you're right. We would have to rip out the concrete pavement in order to add additional storm sewers up to Carrollwood and eventually up all the way to Carrollwood to the next section. A little history about this project, we did an overall drainage study. What we had recommended was a storm sewer system that goes basically what you see now, extended to Carrollwood and all the way up Carrollwood. Unfortunately, that costs a lot more than what the city has allotted in their budget. So we had to break it up in segments.
I completely agree. The issue that I see, though, is we're wasting $500,000 because we know that we need to take it all the way up Carrollwood eventually.
Correct.
Right, you're right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I mean, we're looking for this information
So
from y'all.
So this $500,000 includes paving Carrollwood?
No, Ms.
No, it-
Winger,
Up to
the
Carrollwood.
pictures just show in the color or the areas that we're working on?
Blue, the blue.
The blue is the base bid.
Right, Carrollwood is not in colored. We're not even touching Carrollwood. Well, we're doing the areas in color. If you look up there, it's the orange. Well, the orange is add alt
I don't have.
2.
It's not up here. I'm sorry, Rick.
Sorry, we weren't going all the way to Carrollwood, so are we paving this and are we going to have to rip this up?
So what Mr. Granados just told me, jump in at any point if I'm getting this wrong, but add alt 2 would be concrete.
Correct.
So in the event that we decide to channel more water underground from Carrollwood, we would have to tear out that $500,000 worth of concrete.
But we're not doing that right now. We're not voting on that, or are we?
We're discussing everything right now, Ms. Winger.
Right. Well, what is the first figure that says drainage and roadway? Does that include the roadway on Carrollwood or not?
So the first figure that you're looking at in blue, the base bid, it includes 4 inlets at the intersection of Banyan and Carrollwood, only 4 inlets. And then it takes whatever drainage is going to that point and diverts it all the way down to the outfall, which you see at the bottom near Northwest Military. Adult 2 is an extension of Adult 1 is the extension of the base bid, which takes it all the way past Garden View, which allows for significantly more flow picked up off the street and takes it into a underground storm sewer.
So, Mr. Granados,
God.
if I understand this correctly, if we don't do adult 1, then we're wasting money yet again
Correct.
doing the base.
That's why initially the history of this project was to just do that intersection based off of the constraints that we had budget-wise. But after further analysis, it was determined that we needed to extend it to make a significant impact, because just doing the base bid won't be the best bang for your buck.
Well, because we would be wasting money.
Correct. So we highly recommend add alternate 1 if you were to decide just on base bid.
It would seem to me that base and adult 1 are really what we should be focusing on. Adult 2 appears to be, and adult 3 appear to be ways for us to go ahead and tear stuff up and go ahead and repeat it, as you pointed out. I mean, I don't really see how 2 and 3 really bias anything. We'll end up burning money on that for really no reason, because we'll have to go ahead and tear up what we just built. Is that?
Well, you're right with regard to adult 3, because that's something we'd just have to fund somewhere as it comes in, and you're looking estimate of $21,000.
Would it make sense to go ahead and do the adult 3, 1, and base, and just skip 2 with the assumption that we are going to extend the green part, if you will, all the way up to Carrollwood at some later date? I know that the folks on Banyan here would, that small section of Banyan would not be immediately redone, but we would be using, I think, from the looks of this, we'd be using our money a bit more wisely by not doing these cover-over extensions here that doesn't really provide us any value add. We're not getting any additional drainage, and that's really what seems like the problem is.
To get to have you, I could agree with adult 3. I agree that's something we do not have to look at. Adult 2, There's gonna be a shortage right now, but by the end of the year, the cash we have coming in from the various projects should cover adult two. What that would have the effect of, you'd be concentrating on this thing for this year.
Mr. Gregory, you realize that if we ever decided to take care of any additional water that's on Carrollwood, which is one of the biggest issues,
We'd be tearing it up.
we'd have to tear out adult two.
Makes no sense.
I know, that's why I'm saying adult two should be done,
Should be?
should be done.
Why?
If you look at that, you know as well as I do, we're not gonna come back to this project for years. The idea that we'll do it in the future, you know as well as I do, does not exist. We'll go on to other things because other things do exist.
And we're gonna
If you-
continue to have drainage problems there. Why would we
Ms. Winger.
pave something?
If you do Banyan, if you do the adult two, we'll ask the engineer.
We're not doing
Does-
Banyan, we're doing a
does-
little piece of
Does
Banyan.
adult two provide a significant increase avoiding the water coming down Carrollwood? Or does it provide no positive increase in the water that's coming off of Carrollwood?
It doesn't have a drainage impact.
No drainage impact.
Given the fact that the street is poorly, in poor shape there, it will help the runoff reach the inlets better. But other than that, without extending your storm sewer system, it's not picking anything up additional.
So we can eliminate adult two, and that does not affect the drainage impact of the rest of the project.
Correct.
Wouldn't it be more
right.
cost-effective for us just to resurface it for the residents in the interim?
Given the condition of it,
Gotta do at least adult one.
doing I think what you suggested was a mill and overlay, is that what you said?
Just
Or
something
recon-
that's gonna make it a little bit more palatable to the people that have to drive down there.
Or some asphalt on it, whatever, then, right?
I think the
real
problem
mess.
is the foundation, it's the subgrade. I think doing that, it'll still fall apart when the rain does start penetrating into the subgrade again.
So one more question, I promise my last one. If we decided to take care of the issues further upstream, would the existing culverts underneath be able to handle the additional capacity?
Correct, it will. That's why they are so big, because we had to design for the ultimate, which is accounting for the majority of the flow, and that's why we have two 7x4 box culverts. We could have made it smaller and had a small impact, but that's not what we're designing for. We're designing for the future. So when you do eventually extend your culverts all the way up Carrollwood in X amount of years, it will be able to handle the flow in the future.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I want to amend my motion.
Mr. Gregory, please.
I move that we accept base bid one and adult one for the Watershed 3 Drainage Project Improvements Phase 1.
I will second that.
We have a first by Mr. Gregory, a second by Mr. Sanderson. Any more discussion? Mr. Sanderson.
Do you have, at your office, it doesn't appear to be here, but do you already have a plan made out to extend the Alt 1 all the way to Carrollwood with the appropriate inputs, if you will, so that way we can get better drainage on Carrollwood? Has that been designed?
Yeah,
Is that,
preliminary, yes, it has.
Okay.
Not to a detail of where to place the inlets or what grade to put the roadway at, because right now everything's being channeled through the street. It's conveying all of your flow. Same thing with Banyan. Everything's flowing through the center. The major change here is we're taking everything to the outside and making it at a crown and taking all that flow from the gutter line.
certainly to Mr. Gregory's point right here, this is going to be forgotten. What I'd really like to do is to go ahead and get these folks here to come in with that engineering drawing there and get that committed to this and vote on that in sometime in the future, so that way that we can get all of this working. Maybe we don't have to go ahead and, we can do the base and Alt 1 now, but we should be doing, it sounds like we need to be doing the drainage there at Carrollwood pretty soon and do something to make that happen. I'm not sure what we can do right now to do that.
I think we would all want to, it's just a matter of the finances right now. Mr. Rapley?
Mayor, I'd like to point out too, we did carve out about 400,000 in the street maintenance. So If we wanted to do the adult two at some point down the road, we'd have to look at using the street maintenance fund in next year's budget to do those at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Rapley. Any more
Unless, I mean, again, we've identified the 20 or so streets for the seal coat project, and that's what's dedicated to the 400,000 right now in the street maintenance.
And seal coat is not something, in my opinion, that has to be done this year. You can delay that a year. That's just my opinion on that.
I haven't really, I mean, my observations are limited, and I'm not a civil engineer, but I haven't really seen any great results from this seal coat. I mean, I don't see anything that comes with it that is of use. I think these are probably Band-Aids. I'd like to go ahead and see us actually do something that makes a difference.
If I may elaborate on that, the seal coats actually preserve the
That's
life of the
intent.
road, and it actually makes it
Yeah, we've heard
more
that
impenetrable
before.
to water in, getting inside the base, the subgrade. So it extends the life of the road.
The usability or of preserving streets which are in pretty bad shape, I just, you know,
Well, you want to take care of your best streets first. That way, after a certain time frame, the degradation of the roadway is almost exponential to where you want to take care of it early. That way you don't have to.
perhaps on select streets it makes sense, but on ones like Atwater where there was applied, I think that was just
Correct. You don't
putting
want-
a Band-Aid to a gunshot wound. I mean, it's just, it didn't really make sense to me at the time.
Correct. There's a certain threshold to where you would have to have more of a full depth reconstruction or other types of reconstruction that aren't full depth.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Granados. We have no further discussion.
Seconded, so I have nothing.
All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Mr.
That was the
Granados.
amendment to the motion.
You're right. Going back to the original motion,
Okay, Mayor, the original motion now is what Mr. Gregory originally said, which was to accept the bid of Easy Bell, but limited only to base bid plus alternate one.
okay?
Right.
All in favor?
Why-
I will second.
So what is the original motion? That's the original motion? Okay.
Unanimous. Thank you, council. Okay, jumping back up to the top of the agenda, item number 12, discussion and possible action on the appointment of an alternate to the zoning commission. Mr. Rapley?
Yes, Mayor. This is on the agenda, I believe, because Mr. Herndon, who was an alternate, was appointed to the zoning commission, which leaves an alternate appointment that needs to be made by council to complete the zoning commission.
So we got some stuff in the mail, and I wanted to nominate William Bueller because he's been serving on Board of Adjustment, and I think it would be interesting for him to move over to zoning.
Mr. Schnall, you have something to say there?
I would have to look at the ordinance that the council adopted, but I thought that ordinance included a statement for members of the Board of Adjustment could not be also members of another commission. I
He's
think we
not
should
on the
look at
Board of
that.
Adjustment. He's not on it.
I thought you just said he was on the Board of
He
Adjustment.
had been.
Okay, if he's not on the Board of Adjustment now, then he would be eligible for appointment.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask a question about
Sir,
that?
Mr. Ismail.
That Ms. Winger may be perfectly correct. I don't know for a fact, but we still have him listed as a member. So it would be helpful to have clarification if he is or is not a member of the Board of Adjustment.
Well, I thought we were voting on the members of the Board of Adjustment. Maybe we should move to that first. Because we're voting on that tonight.
Mr. Schnall, can you give us a little bit of clarification on who makes that appointment for the alternate on the zoning?
I believe under the zoning ordinance as it stands to now, it's a council appointment. I will look at that language. Mr. Bueller's email, however, says, "I have previously served as a member of the zoning commission and presently, serve on the Board of Adjustments."
Right.
So I don't know whether the list Mr. Isbrand has is correct, what Mr. Bueller says is correct. All I recall, though, is that when the Board of Adjustment composition was changed at a prior meeting within the last 60 days, there was a provision that said the members of the Board of Adjustment could not be members of the Zoning Commission or the Architectural Review Committee.
Correct, I agree.
To check on the appointments to the board, to the Zoning Commission, requires looking at that provision as it stands now. Section 50-590, 5 members shall be appointed to thereto, meaning to the Zoning Commission, by the City Council, each to serve a term of 2 years, beginning on June 1 of each odd-numbered year and ending on May 31 of the next succeeding odd-numbered year. That's what it says, according to the material that's been circulated as part of the zoning review process.
Correct. Anyway,
So,
that was my nomination. Anybody else can,
I too have a nomination if nobody else does, nobody wants to go first. Mr. Isbin, do you have somebody?
I would propose Scott Gray. Mr. Gray has served for at least 5 years plus on the zoning commission until this last May, when the appointments ended and there was churn there. Mr. Gray was also instrumental in a lot of the research related to the short-term rentals work that was done on the zoning ordinance that will come back to us. And I do think that there's a lesson to be learned of the value of institutional knowledge, of perhaps having someone who has served as a full commissioner into a alternate position. So I would suggest Mr. Gray.
Okay, I just have one person as well, Mr. Rick Lopez. He lives on Twin Leaf. Rick Lopez on Twin Leaf. I believe Mr. Lopez is still here. If y'all would like to hear from him, council? Mr. Lopez, would you like to come up and make any comments? You sure? Okay. But he's in the real estate, he's a real estate investor, and yes, ma'am. Okay. So, Mr. Chenault, how do we proceed from here now that we have 3 options?
I believe in the prior appointments, there was a motion made to appoint, there was a second, and there was a vote.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I nominated William Bueller for the zoning alternate.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Winger,
I'll second.
a second by Mr. Sanderson. All in favor?
May we have discussion?
Oh, yes, sir, I'm sorry.
I don't have necessarily an issue with Mr. Bueller, but I don't think we have clarity of whether he is qualified to serve in this position based on, again, what our city website states our current composition and Board of
But
Adjustment
we're
is.
voting on the Board of Adjustment tonight, so you won't vote for him for that.
Well, he's currently serving in that, Ms. Winger. That's the problem here. I mean, it's the council's will. I just want to make that clear because
Yeah,
it
I
will reflect
understand,
how I
right.
would feel the need to vote.
We do have ARC and BOA adjustments further down on the agenda.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, all in favor of Mr. Bueller? All opposed? I'm sorry, all opposed? Okay, Mr. Bueller will be the alternate, 3-2. Discussion and possible action on meeting space utilization of council chambers, including furniture. Mr. Isbrand.
Mayor and council, in the short term that I've had the privilege of serving up here and spending more time at City Hall, it's been eye-opening to me some of the space utilization issues that we have here and the ability of whether it be staff or us or members of the public to come in and have a place to meet and be able to do collaborative work. It's my understanding that we have tables and chairs that previously were in the back of the council chambers that are not currently in use, and I believe it would be appropriate to return those to the back of the council chambers to make additional workspace available for general use, and also to potentially address any needs by those who might have physical impairments. So I would move that we direct the city manager to return to the city council chambers the tables and chairs that were previously removed from the back.
Thank you, Mr. Israel. That's a motion, I take it?
I'm sorry, that is a motion, yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. May,
Mr. Mayor, I second that motion.
a second by Mr. May. Do we have any discussion? Mr. Gregory?
I'm looking at the background, third paragraph. Since that time, the tables and chairs have been placed in storage and are unused, exacerbating the workspace issue and further limiting the collaborative workspace. First, they can always be brought in. It says for staff. I haven't seen a lot of staff members use these tables in the back during council meetings. Council members sit here. Board and committees don't meet during the city council meeting, so that wouldn't be, and commissions, so that wouldn't be applicable. And the general public during publicly held meetings. General public has a jillion chairs they can sit in, plus tables that are back there. I count at least two tables, and I'm sure we can bring in a lot of smaller tables. It just seems to me that the table should be here as needed, not just here all the time. When you bring in especially one of those tables where there's a ton, and you're actually eliminating spaces, I mean, it just weighs a ton. So I don't see that the bringing the chairs back into council chambers during the city council meeting adds to anything. All these other things can be done by light tables that can be folded and brought in. I mean, card tables, any such thing that's light that can be taken away and not left out there. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Mr. Sanderson?
So as a person who has used the ADA on a number of occasions since I am hard of hearing, my left ear is gone, I am not aware of anything that is required other than reasonable accommodation. There is no requirement to go ahead and have alternate seating locations here to, for whatever reason in the back. There is, no city that I'm aware of here, at least San Antonio, other ones that have, tables in the back where people crowd around in the back and kind of hold an alternate court. I've never seen that in other cities. Maybe we want to kind of do that, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me to have, multiple centers of gravity here within the to distract from city business, which we're supposed to be doing here and now.
Mr. Mayor, may I make one other observation?
By all means, Mr. Gregory.
If you go back to the community room, you'll find there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 large tables that can be folded and put against the wall that could any time be brought over here that can easily accommodate committees and this and that. So we have the tables that can be brought in very easily and removed at any time. And I think that's really the solution. We have the tables already that are easily movable and can be used at any appropriate time.
I agree. I think keeping it flexible and clean is the solution, in my opinion.
Mr. May, yes, sir.
Very brief comment. We have important things to discuss. What we should not be wasting time on is something that to me is a matter of, simply having predilections for a piece of furniture. But I have been here in this chamber when people have come in and they have used that, whether they're in a wheelchair or whether they have materials that they want to write on, and there's absolutely no reason that the resources of the people should not be put to use. And it makes more sense to keep the larger tables that used to be here up and not being dragged back and forth and back and forth. That's a waste of employee resource. So that's why I support this, and I'm not so sure about the ADA compliance. And frankly, if we have an opportunity to cut that liability off, why not do it? It doesn't make any sense.
Thank you, Mr. May.
Antonio would also be liable as well, too.
Thank you, Mr. Sanderson. I just have to say that I think having the tables here is a big benefit for the community, where I've seen them work on projects back there, whether it was stuffing Easter baskets or preparing for different events. I've been here for many meetings, just the way Mr. Gregory was when he got here, and he went to the back to sit at a table, and he had to drag a couple chairs over here to sit down with Mr. Granados before the meeting, just because that's a good place to meet. It's a nice full-size table that you could roll the plans out and have multiple people comfortably and professionally sit down at a real table as opposed to a card table, especially when we actually have the pieces of furniture readily available. Mr. Rapley, did you have a comment?
Yes, Mayor, I just want to say that the table that y'all were using in the executive session, the brown one, was a heavily used table during the day for staff, to have meetings with people that walk in the door, whether they're walking through their plans for permits, so on. One of the things I could say is, if possible, we could take that table and move it back in here to have that as a nice formal table, because we do have a lot of meetings. We have a lot of outside agencies or external folks that come in, and we have meetings. And it's really not conducive to pull up the folding table. What I would suggest, though, if the table were to be back in, that we could either cover it during council meetings, or I'd have to ask Mr. Schnall and putting a sign for only ADA or reserved for that. But the primary use for that table is during the day for staff and the public to meet. And it was heavily used during my time here, especially that table that y'all just sat in executive session. The other one that was back there was a lot heavier, bulky, coming apart, so I wouldn't suggest returning that particular table back here.
Thank you, Mr. Rapley. Ms. Winger.
Well, since I've had a lot more experience in this room than Mr. May has over the years, we can use these tables that are right here. They're not card tables. They can be moved, you can have meetings up here, you can put them in the back. We had a problem with the tables in the back and how they were being used. Those tables do not make us ADA compliant. No other city has tables in the back, and they're all ADA compliant, so that's not an issue. So I'm not in favor of going back to it, because I think it created a problem, and I'm not in favor of it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Winger. Mr. Isbrand.
Yeah, I would just clarify, no one said that it would make us ADA compliant. Again, I don't understand what the objection would be to having additional workspace here, particularly from those of us who are constantly advocating that the city staff needs to be working hard and doing things to have multiple places in which to do it. We have this furniture. It was paid for by taxpayer dollars. It sits basically unused for whatever reason.
Right.
When we have a simple need to do it. And I will say personally that when I served on zoning commission on any number of occasions, I would use those tables to meet with applicants who would have large documents that they wanted to be able to use. There's a legitimate reason to have them here. It's a sad statement, I think, that we even have to debate this for whatever reason, when we're simply asking to put furniture that we have in place so that it can be used.
Thank you, Mr. Isbrand. All
One
in
point,
favor?
Mayor, real quick, sorry, I'd like to add is the professional decorum side of that. We do have a lot of external stakeholders that come in and have meetings, and it is a little different between putting some tables up and having a permanent conference table to meet in regards to city business.
Mr. Rapley, I agree. I'd love to bring the professionalism and a little bit of decor back. Mr. Gregory.
Well, there is that thing I hadn't thought of. We had a conference room for years. It's now, staff uses it. And that was a basic need. Is there a place around here, Mr. Rapley, that we can get a conference room? I mean, you have basically a board table that should be in a conference room. I think that probably kills two birds with one stone. Is there a place that can be set aside to use that table for a conference room agenda?
Mr. Rapley, if I may? I think we at one point had discussed about building that out and making another office there, so we could actually build that out and make a conference table area. That'd be around $30,000, and we have a table that we could use for free. I'd much rather use the table for free as opposed to building out a conference space, because we're kind of limited with the real estate here.
Well, I think, Mayor, obviously, and that was part of the discussion about constructing an office out of there, but I think the primary motive for doing that was to move court into that office, so they're primarily facing the lobby. So we have people coming in to the lobby to take care of court tickets, and as court days, they come in and out of that door and they process on the way out versus going through this door, because we constantly try to not to have people come through this door during court. So from a logistics standpoint, it made sense to eventually look at expanding that and making that dedicated to a court office and opening that up to be more accessible and inviting when you come in and take care of your court, I hate to say tickets along those lines, but that would be the added benefit of doing that. With doing that, would alleviate some space in there to allow for a conference room, more than likely at that point.
See, that's what I'd rather see.
You want
You want to move tables and chairs all around to try to find a place to have a conference room. I mean,
Not
that makes a lot more sense than what furniture we're gonna put in the back or we're not gonna have in the back.
You want to make this room smaller.
What I'm saying is, we've gotta find the conference room we lost.
Well, why did we lose it?
Rather to make a community room into a quasi-conference
We
room,
shouldn't have lost it.
doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I don't see why we can't find a place that we can turn into a conference room, one way or another.
Community room.
We're really talking outside the scope of this
Yeah.
agenda item.
All right,
Councilman, my plan was to come back at some point in front of council, because we did carve out about 30,000 in continual building improvements, and I did mention in that we were going to look at that possibility of dedicated court office, which leads into the lobby. It makes more sense, it facilitates that primary operations of the city, and it makes sense from a customer service standpoint.
Okay, with that, on that note, getting towards 10 o'clock, all in favor
of what?
of the motion on the table?
Oh, okay.
Do you want us to repeat the motion for you, Mr. Gregory? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion fails, 3-2, or 2-3, I'm sorry.
Given the time, I'd like to go ahead and make a movement to table 14 through 16, but I know I need to do it one at a time, to table 14.
No, we need to go ahead and do that.
Going to do it? Okay.
Yeah.
It's getting late, but surely we can do it if you want to.
Everybody makes it, everybody nominate.
Okay, perfect. Discussion and possible action to appoint/reappoint for one member to the Ad hoc Project Committee to fill a vacant position to be appointed by Councilmember Leslie Winger.
Okay, well, I'm not making an appointment because I can't find anybody who wants to be on, so you can table that if you want.
Ms. Winger, are you willing to take recommendations from other council members?
No, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Somebody else can do it if they want to.
As council liaison, can I make a recommendation?
We did have someone show interest in the packet I provided y'all.
Well, I understand that. I'd like to nominate Mr. McCormick.
He's already on.
No, he's not.
I'm not voting for that.
Okay, we have a nomination for Mr. McCormick. Do we have a second? Second. Second by Mr. May. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Mr. McCormick will be on the Ad hoc Project Committee, so by 3-2. Consider an act on appointments to the Architectural Review Committee. Ms. Winger.
Yes, so we're all making appointments, so I would like to nominate Charles Pope, who is an architect. He was originally a chairman of the Architectural Review Committee some years ago. He recently moved back to the city. He had to go off because he moved out. He lives on Garden View. 224 Garden View.
Mr. Mayor, wasn't this committee, because if I recall correctly, every one council member appoints somebody.
That's what I just said.
I was the one person who did not appoint anybody to
didn't.
this committee.
You keep
This-
bringing this
Ms.
up, we
Winger,
never did
Ms.
it.
Winger,
This is my appointment. It's not Mrs. Winger's appointment. It's no one
It's
else's.
everybody's
Ms. Winger,
appointment.
if I remember correctly, we never got this settled the last time. I don't know if there's
Never made
a,
it.
not that I
That
don't
was-
trust either one of y'all, but I don't know if there's a more official way that we can settle this. Maybe reviewing the minutes
Why do
and,
you keep bringing this up? First you said it was Board of Adjustment. You keep changing it every meeting. We never made the appointments to either Board of Adjustment or Architectural Review.
Board of Adjustment is complete and full.
No, it isn't. We never made the
Read
appointments.
this. They're the 5 members are there.
But we
There
didn't
are only
make the
4 members in
appointments in May.
There are only 4 members in
We
architecture.
did not
review.
make the appointments in May. We kept delaying it. I'm so tired of arguing about this. We have not made the
Ms. Winger.
appointments. Look at the
Ms.
agendas.
Winger, Mr. Schnall?
Mayor, I believe we are on item 15, which is about the Architectural Review Committee.
Right.
So I think we should contain and limit the discussion to just
Right.
filling vacancies that might or might not exist. Whatever vacancies do exist, or whatever terms are up, that's what is the matter before the council right now, not the Board of Adjustment, just the Architectural Review
And-
Committee.
Yes,
And
thank you.
And both of those, Mr. Schnall, as you know very well, you delayed the Board of Adjustment, but the Architectural Review Committee was never nominated in May. It's supposed to come up with the mayoral thing. It was never done, and neither was the Board of Adjustment. So today, we're supposed to be making, other I wouldn't have left it on, we're supposed to be making nominations to both of them. If people want to keep people on, you can certainly nominate them. I would like to nominate Charles Pope.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Winger. Mr. Rapley, you have a comment?
Yes, Mayor. Obviously, these 2 agenda items for appointments to ARC and board were first on, I believe, the June meeting, and they have been since tabled. If you recall, I think y'all as council approved the process for appointments to the ARC and BOA, which is currently in place. But yes, they all need to be appointed or reappointed at this point.
Do you,
Okay. And, Mr. Mayor, if I may just read, as adopted by this governing body at the meeting on November 19th, 2019, with an effective date of December 1, 2019, Section 8-23 of the Code of Ordinances on the Architectural Review Committee says, "The Architectural Review Committee shall consist of 5 members and 3 alternate members who shall be residents of the city of Castle Hills and not members of the City Council, the Zoning Commission, or the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Prior to appointments, the mayor and aldermen are encouraged to solicit applications, resumes, or indications of interest from citizens. Each alderman shall appoint 1 member whose place on the committee shall correspond to the place of the appointing alderman. The mayor shall appoint a chairman from among the members appointed by each alderman. There shall be 3 alternates to this board, 1 appointed by the mayor and 2 appointed by the city council at large."
Correct.
So that is where we are now. And I heard Ms. Wenger make a nomination, which I think is tantamount under this wording to an appointment of Mr. Pope. And it would be appropriate to ask each member of the governing body if they also have an appointment to the ARC at this time.
Mr. Schnall,
I will change it to say that I appoint Charles Pope.
Mr. Schnall, just to clarify, is it Ms. Winger's appointment to make?
And Ms. Wenger is an elected member of this governing body. The language I just read said, "Each alderman shall appoint 1 member whose place on the committee shall correspond to the place of the appointing alderman."
I understand, it's just there was a discrepancy between her and Mr. Gregory, so I want to confirm that that is her appointment to make.
Each member of the governing body has an appointment to make. Because Ms. Wenger made an appointment does not change whether Mr. Gregory has an appointment. Mr. Gregory has an appointment, as do Mr. May, Mr. Sanderson, and Mr. Isbrand. And from those 5 appointees, you select the chair.
I got you.
I would like a clarification. I've been given a piece of paper that says the term starts, the 2-year term, beginning on June 1 of each odd number year, namely last year, and then it ends next year. I have been given a piece of paper that says there are already 4 people on this committee and a chairman. But if you would let me finish.
Ms. Winger, if you could quit interrupting. Mr. Gregory, please.
I would like to know, are the current members who I've been told are on this committee right now, are they on this committee right now or not?
Ms. Winger,
They are currently holdovers, Mr. Gregory. They've been
When were
on,
they appointed? Were
When
they
were they
appointed in an odd year?
they were
Namely,
appointed,
last year?
not,
I am trying to talk with the city manager.
they would have been appointed, I think when this Mayor Howell was appointed.
So all
elected.
these are open.
All those are open, yes.
All right, thank you.
perfect. Okay, so you appointed Mr. Pope, is that correct, Ms. Winger? Ms. Winger? You appointed Mr. Pope?
What's his first name?
He didn't submit an application? He did not submit an application?
I had actually talked to him about this some time ago when we were originally.
Can you use your microphone, Ms. Winger?
I had talked to him about this. There was no requirement that an application be submitted. I had spoken to him about this some time ago when we were originally supposed to make the appointments. And we didn't, so I'm appointing him now.
Okay. Mr. Schnall, do we have to vote on that appointment?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have Mr. Pope. Do we have any other appointments? Mr. May?
Yes, I received information from Kevin Chernus. Is Kevin still here? Great. Thank you for your diligence in being here. And one thing I just wanted to mention, he has both residential and commercial architecture experience. He grew up here and moved back very recently. But something that needs to be said is I called him late this afternoon and I explained that there might be some other holdovers that would like to serve on that committee. And would he mind if he served merely as an alternate so as to allow others to serve and he could sit and learn? I think we could all learn a lot about taking that kind of position. I applaud you for that. So now that I'm sitting here, it occurs to me that before we push forward on that appointment, is there anyone on the current council that has a desire to keep a holdover in a position? Because if so, Mr. Chernus wants to serve, and he should serve, but he's willing to do it as an alternate so as to keep someone on that particular committee.
How does he spell his name?
Cherniss, if I can read.
Yes, that's correct. That's his- Well, are you appointing
May,
him
that's
as a
your
regular
appointment?
member?
If there's no one that has a burning desire to
I
continue.
think you should appoint him as a regular member, because otherwise we all have to vote for it. Go ahead and appoint him.
Okay,
If he is your appointee, then
Yeah, he's your appointee.
we're not going to
Appoint him.
waste any time. Mr. Chernus, you are on that.
Thank you so much, Mr. May.
It's good.
Mr.
Mr.
Ismail?
Mayor, my appointee will be Juan Solis.
Okay,
Mine will be Greg Bickerstaff.
okay.
What did you say?
Greg Bickerstaff.
Mr. Gregory?
I'm going to refrain until I'll get another person.
Oh, you're not going to make it?
No.
Okay. Mr. Schnall?
Are we going to vote on alternates?
Vote on
If
alternates, is
there,
that okay?
the ordinance says there shall be 3 alternates to the board. I'm sorry, gotta make sure I'm looking at which one of this. There'll be 3 alternates to the committee, 1 appointed by the mayor and 2 appointed by the council at large. So the mayor's appointment would be an appointment, and the at-large would have to be voted on by
everybody.
majority vote of the governing body.
Right.
Okay, well, I'll make my appointment, Ms. Moretta Scott. And we need 2 more alternates.
I would like to nominate, now I nominate, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I would like to nominate Dean Aiken, Aitken. He is a Realtor. He and his wife moved here about a year ago, and they bought a very architecturally significant house on Lujan, and I think he's very interested in architecture, and that's why I picked him.
Okay.
I'll second that.
We have a first and second on Mr. Aiken. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you so much. We have one more nomination, council. Mr. May?
I'd like to nominate Bruce Smiley.
Okay. We have a second? Okay, ask one more time if we have a second. Okay, that dies for lack of a second. Do we have another nomination?
I would nominate Barry Middleman.
Did we vote for Bruce Smiley?
Well, I never got a second, Ms. Winger.
Oh, we didn't get a second, okay, fine.
Barry Middleman,
Yes,
do we
sir.
have a second?
No, he had a conflict.
Barry Middleman? Okay, we'll ask one more time if we have a second for Mr. Middleman. Okay, we have a second for Mr. Middleman. All in favor? All opposed? 4-1. Okay, I think that is it. We have one more that will be lacking, Mr. Gregory, that's correct?
I'll have it next month.
Okay, thank you so much. And now we're on to item number 16, consider an act on appointments to the Board of Adjustment.
So I appoint Pam Grunwald, who lives on Moss. She's also been very active in the city. She lived here for many, many years, and she was on the zoning review committee, and she's quite knowledgeable.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Winger.
Mayor,
Mr. Isbrand.
I'll appoint Bruce Smiley Califf.
Thank you, Mr. Isbrand.
I'm sorry, who are you appointing?
Bruce Smiley Califf.
Mr. May.
I'd like to appoint Justin Villegas of 103 Cremeria. He's a shareholder in a law firm and a lawyer practicing. He reached out to me 3 times.
How does he spell his last name?
Villegas.
That's correct.
Thank you so much, Mr. May. Mr. Sanderson?
I'm going to go ahead and hold off on my appointment till next month.
Oh, you already gave me a name.
Okay, Mr. Gregory?
Now, I'll appoint Tom Aiken. He's been on many committees. He lives on Sunflower. Fine gentleman.
Well, I
Tom
didn't
Aiken.
catch the name, sir.
Spelled differently.
Tom, A-K-I-N.
Okay. Tom Aiken?
Tom Aiken?
Yes.
And
I'm going to withdraw that for a second. I'm going to go and look at my notes here. Hang on just a second. I'm going to withdraw my withdrawal.
Okay, and so we have 3 alternates, 1 appointed by me and 2 by council?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm gonna hold off on mine because I haven't had anybody reach out to me. Does anybody have any nominations?
I would nominate John Squire.
Okay, we have a nomination for John Squire. All in favor?
Was there a second, Mayor?
I'm sorry, second, Mr. May. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, 3-2.
I have my appointment to be Tom Fenstress.
That, you're going back to
So you're gonna appoint after all,
B of A now?
Mr. Sanderson?
Yeah.
Yes, he's going to a regular,
Mr.
Yeah,
Sanderson?
as a regular, yes, a regular one. Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
Mr. Sanderson, you want to appoint Mr.
Re-
Fentress?
As a regular, that's correct.
Okay. We need one more nomination for,
so I'm sorry, I got a little mixed up here. Tom Aiken was appointed to be a regular member,
I'm
right?
sorry, I couldn't hear you, Ms. Winger. Can you use your microphone?
Tom Aiken was appointed to be a regular member.
Correct.
So we
Yes.
have Justin Villegas, Bruce Smiley Califf, Tom Aiken, Tom Fentress, and Pam Grunwald, right? So we're all set. Do we have any alternates yet?
Well, we just got the first one. We're looking for another one right now.
Okay. So I'd like to nominate David Seifert, who has lived here all his life. His father was a former city manager here, and he lives on Sunflower.
Okay, we have a first from Mr. Seifert by Ms. Winger.
I'm sorry, what was the last name again, please?
Seifert?
Seyfarth.
Thank you.
Father was city manager here years ago.
I said that.
Was there a second?
No,
Second
Mr.
here.
Oh, second by Mr. Sanderson. All in favor? Unanimous. And I guess I'll go ahead and make my appointment, Mr. Rick Lopez. And I think that is it, correct, Mr. Rapley?
I'm sorry, who?
Rick Lopez on Twinley?
Rick? Oh, okay.
So is that the end of the alternates, no more alternates?
I believe so, Mr. Rapley.
There's 3 alternates.
Okay, then we're filled. I think that is it.
And the mayor shall appoint the chairman from among the 5 regular members.
Right.
Is it possible for me to come back so I can talk to the people and see who is interested in that?
You can defer this appointment. I would recommend, if you don't make it tonight, to put it on the agenda for the February meeting.
Okay, I'd rather do that. That way I don't give anybody more responsibility than they want. Last but not least, announcements of mayor and council members on items of community interest. Mr. Isbrand.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to, unfortunately, the time is late, so I hope that there are at least a few people at home that are watching us by video, and I'm sad that the individuals I'm going to talk about are not here. I wanted to take a moment to recognize our police and fire department for their outstanding performance in responding to the fire at 207 Honeysuckle. In particular, I'd like to recognize 2 members of the police department, Corporal David Fawcett, who saw the lightning strike a transformer while on patrol. Shortly thereafter, observed smoke in the area and responded to the home of the victim. His attentiveness there really was profound for us. From there, he radioed dispatch, fire was sent. Additionally, Officer Earlywine responded. They found an open door at the rear of the home. They entered while Officer Earlywine checked to make sure there were no individuals there. Corporal Fawcett removed the pet that was in the home and got them to safekeeping. I think it's just a remarkable example of the great work that our police and firefighters do jointly, and I wanted to make sure that we took the moment tonight to recognize them and how much worse the situation would have been, could have been, if not for how observant they are and for their dedication to our community. So I thank those police officers. I thank every member of the fire department who responded as well.
Mr. Sanderson.
I have nothing at this time.
Mr. May.
A quick report. The first councilman's office hours went off without a hitch. It was hosted by Sushi Hano last Tuesday, generated a lot of discussion. One of those agenda items that was most discussed was the Banyan project, and we did something about that tonight, so I'm really happy about that. And I hope we continue. The next councilman's office hours will be on February 4th, Tuesday. Every first Tuesday, it'll be at Pets Barn, 2108 Northwest Military. The management has assured me that pets are welcome. I'll make sure there are treats for the humans and treats for the dogs.
Thank you, Mr. May. Ms. Winger.
Yes, I just like to note that I understand that the former Wedgewood, I don't know the name of the new building.
The Ensemble.
It's what?
Ensemble?
Ensemble, okay. I believe they're opening.
Soon.
And people are starting to move in, and so welcome to everyone.
They'll be open, I believe, in about 45 days. Mr. Gregory?
No comment.
Just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to serve. Mr. Isbrand, Mr. May, and myself attended a newly elected officials training on Friday, and it was a good opportunity to learn about how we can do things a little bit better for our community. Thank you all so much. It's 10:17. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
First, second, all in favor?